energy is fabulous here. You know, I just came back from Italy last week, and going through all of the magnificent cathedrals and the basilicas and all, I kept wondering while I was sitting back there, would you actually see the Foo Fighters in the basilica? I think it's time. I think it's time. Actually, what's remarkable is so many of those absolute amazing architectural wonders are empty. The vast majority of Europe no longer goes to church. Not unlike what's happening in this country. There's a dynamic change that's taking place. And what's happening is it's going from an external world into an internal world, from a religious world to a spiritual world. So, by the way, men, this is the new Italian tie. It's a lot more comfortable. So, today I'm talking about the spirituality of near death. First of all, I would like to say, please don't try to practice this. The idea of near death and what's going on with near death and the idea of resuscitating people and how long people can be dead before you can bring them back, all of this is changing. Science has been changing. I remember reading where back in the late 1800s, a great physicist said there's nothing more to learn in science. Not even 10 years later, quantum physics sprung up and everybody's going, whoa, what a shift. The whole Newtonian physics world shifted into the quantum world of really teeny little tiny things like Higgs bosons. How many of you have heard of Higgs bosons? Isn't that amazing? You've heard of Higgs bosons, something that we can't even see, touch, feel, except we can see the trace of it. Same thing is true of who you truly are. You can't really see it. Can't really taste it, touch it. All the sensory apparatus doesn't work for that part of who you are. We, as a society, make determinations about what's right in terms of judgments about, oh, this person's been dead for this long, the body's been dead for this long. They're dead. Up until about 10 years ago, as soon as the heart stopped beating, it was pretty much that was it. You were dead. My heart stopped beating for 7 minutes. I was classified dead. They were bringing in body bag. But today, we're realizing the science is shifting. We now know that the body does begin to let go. The mind begins to let go. And spirit begins to let go at a certain point in time, but doesn't mean that you can't come back. So, for example, one of the recent findings is that, well, let me give you an example of somebody as a doctor, his first internship, he's in the emergency room, and in the emergency room, the first thing that happens on his watch is cardiac arrest. And he rushes in there. There's no other doctors. There's no senior medical personnel to tell him what to do. So he starts doing CPR. Makes perfect sense. And he continues doing it. And 10 minutes later, he's still doing it. And the nurses are coming in going, it's okay. He's gone. He says, no. I'm not going to let this happen. And he continued. And he continued for 45 minutes. And he continued for an hour and 2 hours and 3 hours. And in the 4th hour, the heart started beating again, and the man came awake. Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. I thought you were supposed to be dead. What we know is if you're not getting oxygen in the body, that the body begins to let go. The cells begin to die off. But CPR is pumping oxygen through the body. So this mysterious thing that we call our spirit, our soul, is still operating even after the body has stopped. First thing I realized when I passed was my mind was still going. It's like, first thing I was in the corner of the room looking and my mind is still going. Wasn't this interesting? Look at all those people hovering around my body. Look at all the machinery there. The paramedics there. Oh, I'll bet that meter where it's supposed to be doing this and it's doing this means something. The body quit, but spirit didn't. Mind didn't. I was telling Lee last night that my mother and I shared this experience of a near death. We were both at the same age of 35 when we had our experience. And when she passed, she had the out of body, and then she went into this, I call it my Space Odyssey 2001 room. It's white space. But she was greeted by Jesus. I was greeted by a presence. And in the thousands of people that I've talked to who have had this kind of experience, guess what? What you believe you're going to be greeted by is what you're greeted by. If you believe it's Buddha, it's going to be Buddha. If you believe that's who's going to be there. If it's your mother. You see, because the mental world is still continuing, the spiritual world is all there. And what we're finding is some people who have been in hypothermia, and in fact, this is a new practice. The new practice of resuscitation is put people into the cold because it slows the body processes down. It slows the decay down. People can be held in suspension for a long period of time as long as oxygen is furnished to the body. The body, the cells, everything will operate. Near death shouldn't be called near death anymore. You know, back in the 70s when that term was coined, it meant an experience that wasn't really death, but kind of close to death, but not really, but almost. It's actual death. When the heart stops and the brain stops and the organs stop, everything stops, that's called death, death of the body. What we didn't know until now, except that we had thousands of people saying, wait, you know, there is something called afterlife. Different from the hallucinations that we have in a coma, for example. You've all heard the stories of people who have been in a coma and they heard the conversations that were going on and they understood what was happening. You know, the mental faculty was still operating. In the death experience, the mental faculty is not operating in terms of the brain. It's shut down. Put an MRI on it, no activity. So we know that the experience that's taking place in the death experience isn't an epiphenomenon of the brain, because the brain's not working. It's shut down. So what is it that's working? That which you can't see, feel, taste, can't sense. That part of you, which is really the greater part of you. Excuse me, in science, we have had for a long time two divergent views of the universe and how things work. One of them is the classical, what I'll call classical view, which is where things come out of a progression of the very small nanoparticles into atoms, and from atoms into molecules, and molecules into cells, and cells into organs, and organs into a being, and being into the mind and the brain. But when it comes to mind and consciousness, stuck. We're stuck. The other side is that it's consciousness. Consciousness creates, and it creates the mental world that creates the phenomenal world. Very opposite from each other. Now, how long do you think that controversy's been going on? Well, Plato was the first one to start talking about it. Actually, he was the first one we know of to start talking about it. Pythagoras was one before him who talked about it. And Plato's student, Aristotle, was the exact opposite of his mentor, Plato. So Plato said, there is this transcendent, and out of it comes the material world. And Aristotle said, oh, no, that's not true. Basically, it's stuff creates all of that. In quantum physics, we know that the paradoxes of quantum physics cannot be solved from this materialistic viewpoint, from the bottom up. But they are solvable from the top down. In other words, consciousness creates. So we know life goes on. There is truly afterlife. For most people, we don't know what's after that kind of immediate place, huh? Because they don't come back. Well, actually, that's not true. Because what happens in meditation? In deep meditation, you're actually pulling the soul current from your feet. Oh, by the way, I don't use socks. That's another Italian thing I've learned. You're pulling the soul current from your feet up from your body into your third eye and then in. That's exactly what happens to you when you're passing. The energy comes up into your third eye and you leave. Internally leave, not externally leave. So great masters have been able to die while living. That's what they call it. In other words, they're able to do that same process, suspend the operation of the body, go within, and then explore over whatever period that they're in there, these other worlds. And then they come back and they tell us about it. And we go, oh, that can't be true. Can it? Well, try meditating and doing deep meditation, and you begin to find things that you might have difficulty understanding at first, but are really powerful because they tell us who we really are. We are unlimited beings. Did you hear that? Okay, a couple of you heard it. Is my mic on? A couple of you heard it. You're an unlimited being. Let's get this straight. Because actually what we know is there is a perfect form in the spiritual world that informs this world. It's when you're in the physical world that things can get a little dicey. They begin to change. The variables begin to happen. But the perfect form, as Ernest says, still exists. And if you tap the perfect form must come through into this experience. That's why if you're doing prayer work or treatment work and you go into meditation and you go into the perfect form, we call it the archetype, you move to that perfect form of who you are that's whole, complete, and perfect to begin with, and allow that to come through, then everything necessary to correspond to that must also take place. The power of who you are is unlimited. What makes you limited? Beliefs, thoughts, yeah. Our mind. What you accepted to be true when you were a child. All these things that are in our mind, they limit us to this is my perspective of what is. But the truth is you're actually an unlimited being. The spirit of who you are, that archetype of who you are, is unlimited and travels the universe at will. And we go through this life and we learn the lessons that we need to learn, or we gather the knowledge we need to gather, we gather the education we need to understand what everything is all about, and we take that with us into the next experience. We take it into the next experience, which could be another realm, an astral plane, a mental plane, a causal plane, or it might be back into this form. We never die. We simply progress. We simply progress. And Aristotle, his idea that everything stops the moment death occurs, we know is incorrect. It's provable. If it's provable, then it must be good science. And science, by the way, is always changing, isn't it? Coffee was good for me yesterday, but it's not today. You know, this was good for me last week, this isn't good for me this week. I think the Bible had it right when it said everything in moderation. We just have a different idea what moderation is. My moderation is 6 cups a day. Yours may be 1. So the idea of who you are is really important to get a handle on because it's something that causes the vast majority of problems in the world. The limited ego being that we believe we are, this personality, this mental structure, this concept of Larry DeRusha, that part of who we believe we are that's separate from everybody else and everything else is the root of all the problems. It's the root of all the problems. If you are interconnected and holographic, which is part of what the quantum physics tells us about who we are, we're all interconnected. Everything in the universe is interconnected. And isn't it funny that the Hopi Indians talk about their creation myth, and the creation myth is Spider-Woman wove the spider web of the universe. And what do you know about spider webs? Move one part of it and the rest of it moves and changes. Everything's interconnected. And we have string theory today and supersymmetry today and all these great sciences. And you go back to the Ring Vedas and the hymns and they talk about everything is vibration. And what is string theory? It's all about vibration. We're a little slow. It took 5,000 years for us to come back to that, but here we are. We're understanding this. It's time to understand that we're all interconnected. When we know we're all interconnected, that we're all from the same source, that we are all spiritual beings, all in this spaceship called Earth, traveling through a universe that is so spectacularly large that our limited mind can't even comprehend it. I like to say it took the universe 14 billion years to create you so that it could be aware of itself. That kind of thing just kind of does the mind, and it's like, wait. Because the mind has to limit things to understand things so that it can process. And from the days of critical thinking, what we are used to doing is taking things apart to understand them and forget the process of creation. So we're really good at critical thinking. We're good at what's wrong. We have difficulty with the creation process, what we want to create in our lives. And when you have an experience that shows you the unlimited part of who you are, and you begin to realize that the thing holding you back is this between your ears, you go, oh, there really is something else. And after death, there's that moment when you go, wow, how did I get to be this big? I tell people, look, when I was coming back into the body, my first thought was, how am I going to get into that little body? Because there's this sense of being the size of the universe. And there we begin this process of limiting. Okay, I'm going to limit myself into the body. And now I'm the body. And I have this personality. Now I'm the mind. And so this ego structure takes delight in its limitations. The mind takes delight in limitation. It has to limit. That's its job. It has to limit things. But it was never intended to be the sole functioning part of our intelligence. It's one part of our intelligence. It's kind of like the soul and spirit are you getting into the car, which is the body, and you start the engine and you put it in gear, and then the car runs away and you just stepped out for a second and the car's going down the street. What's it doing? It's banging into things and it's plowing into things. It's doing whatever because it's random. When the soul is not connected to the mental processes, it's running wild. So the process of who we are got reversed. The reversal happened because our senses feed the mind, and the mind goes, I like this or I hate this, but it's disconnected from the soul. The process should be the soul determines the experience looks to the senses to get the sensation of it, and feeds the information back. That's the learning process of the soul. But we flipped. We're in a sense-oriented world, sensation. Dogs and cats are sense animals. Most animals are sense animals. They see pictures. If you're having trouble with your dog or your cat, instead of using verbal language with them, use pictures. Get a picture of what you want. Communicates to them really quickly. Because they're sense beings. We're more than sense beings. We have intuition, we have instinct, and we have intellect. We have 3 forms of intelligence. A power that is absolutely astonishing. When you allow the flow of intuition to work in your life, it's a big shift from trying to figure it out and manipulate it and do all the other things. The death experience opens you up to the truth about who you are. And people that come back are fortunate in the sense that they're able to come back and say to everybody else, hey, there's something more here. Something more you may be missing. The truth of who you are is not all this critical thinking that's going on. Not all this nonsense that seems to go round and round. Not all these thoughts that you don't even challenge as whether they're true or they're not true. They come in and you go, it must be true. I thought it. There's more. There's a lot more. Can we live to the age of 600, which is Noah and some of the people in the Bible? I say, yeah, absolutely. Look at where we're going right now. Look at the average age 500, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, maybe 30 years old, 40 years old. What is it today? It's 70, 80, 90. My mother passed at 90. My wife's mother passed at 99. I was also telling Lee last night that when my wife's mother developed pneumonia and they said she was going to pass, that they said, take her home and make her comfortable. So we brought her to our house and called all the relatives, and 26 people came to live in our house for a while, which was supposed to be a day or two, and she survived for another 8 or 9 days. And it was really fascinating to watch this woman who was dying know what was going on. And then my granddaughter, who was about 8 or 9 years old at the time, she came in and she woke me up and she says, Papa, we had my mother in the living room area. And she said, come in here. Jesus is in here. So I followed her in and she says, do you see him? He's at the other end of the bed. And I said, wow. I perceive him, but I don't see him. What's he look like? Well, he has a really long beard and really long hair, and he's very short. I said, wow, what's he wearing? White pajamas. A few minutes later, my mother-in-law passed. See, young kids are closer to the spiritual world, and older folks are close to the spiritual world. What we need to do is close that gap. Because the truth lies in that gap as to who we are and what we're capable of. And whatever anybody has told you about who you are and what you can't do and why it's wrong for you, you start questioning it right away. When your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your uncle or your teacher or anybody, minister, anybody tells you anything about who you are, first thing you do is question it. Really? How do you know that? How do you know who I am? In fact, I'm still struggling to figure that out. You figured it out before I did. That's not true. That's not the truth of who you are. It may be learned behaviors. It may be environmental behaviors. It could be these things that we call genetics, which that whole science world is changing too, isn't it? I do a quick little story. Ted Williams, the baseball player, how many remember him? Ted Williams was a gifted baseball player, wasn't he? Actually, he was not a gifted baseball player when he started. He was a kid that wanted to make some money, and in San Diego at the park that he played, he saw the kids playing. one of the baseball players from a minor league team called the Padres used to practice up there, and he'd practice hitting, and he'd pay the kids a penny for every ball that they would bring back to him. And he goes, oh, I can make money fetching balls. I'm going to do that. And then he wanted to play because he heard that the baseball player was making $1 a day or $2 a day or something. Short part of this story is he would get out there and practice 9, 10, 12 hours a day hitting. He would practice when the lights were out in the field so he could see the ball sharply. He would watch from the side as people would throw the ball so he could understand how the aerodynamics worked. He spent a large part of his early life learning all of these things. Ted Williams was told when he was a kid he was nothing. He couldn't do anything. He was worthless. All the things that, should have shut him down, he realized there was something he was passionate about, and that was this thing where you hit the balls around. That part, that light within him that says, well, this is what I'll do. Shine through. Everybody has that light. You have that light, and you have that. We all have it. And I say, don't let anybody tell you differently. So the experience of dying only opens you up to the greater universe, not the lesser universe. And right now, the thing I would challenge you with is recognize the truth of who you are right now and begin to have the experience of who you are. You can do that through meditation. You can do that through contemplation. You can do that from being quiet and allowing the mind to settle down. And I guarantee you the truth comes through in that silence. It comes from the silence. It doesn't come from the chatter. So I'd like to say part of my mission is if I see in you what you do not see in yourself, I'm the bridge to your becoming. What I mean by that is the gift of having passed gives me the gift of being able to see. And I can see in you what you don't see in yourself. And it's astonishing. If you could see what I could see, I would love to give you my eyes. I'd love to give you this faculty so that you could see who you truly are. What an amazing gift you are. Without you, the entire universe is different. Think about that for a second. Without you, the entire universe is different. Amazing, isn't it? So, take up my challenge. Recognize who you are. Practice. It's a gift that keeps on giving, as they say. Thank you.
I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask you to go to our website. Once there, click on the Contribute button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to the world. I would also ask you to please share this message with anyone you feel might benefit. Again, I want to thank you for joining me and the Agape community as together we bring joy to life.